Chelsea. This is my channel, The Fancy Hat Lady Reads. I'm wearing one of my fancy booktube hats, and today I'm bringing you my collective book haul for the months of June and July. Now, technically, Book Expo and BookCon weren't quite over until a few days into June, but everything that I got during Book Expo and BookCon are in a separate haul video, so I'm going to link that for you if you want it. This is going to be everything else from the past 2 months. So the first book I'm going to show you is one that you already saw in my TBR for this month, August, if you watched it, because I'm planning on reading it this month. This is An Arc of a Choir of Lies by Alexandra Rowland, which is the sequel to A Conspiracy of Truths. I got this copy from Thomas from the channel SFF180, who got a duplicate review copy and sent me his extra. So thank you very much, Thomas. I'm going to link his channel down below. And the thing that's most exciting about this book is that it follows Ilfing, who was an extremely likable side character in book 1. So then the rest of the books in this haul I'm going to lump into 3 categories. The first is used books I got for very cheap. The second is used books I got for less cheap. And then the third is new books. So the first of the used books I got for very cheap is this Penguin Classics edition of In the Land of Time and Other Fantasy Tales by Lord Dunsany. And I've read his most famous novel, The King of Elfland's Daughter, but he's also very well known for his short fiction, which I haven't read. So I don't know how complete this particular edition, this particular collection of his stories is. This obviously is a Penguin Classics compilation of stuff. It's not one of, his collections as published when he was writing. So I'm not sure how much of his short work is included in here and what isn't. But as someone who didn't really know where to start with Lord Dunsany's short fiction, I trust a Penguin Classics collection. The next very cheap used book I picked up was The Invisible Library by Genevieve Cogman. Now this is the first book in what I think is by now getting to be a pretty long series about adventures with multiple realities, alternate realities, and a library organization and adventures. My expectations for this series is basically that it's probably gonna be fun and fast-paced. This copy was obviously very discounted and cheap because it's got a crease on the front cover, but I don't really care. And then the rest of the very cheap used books I have here are sort of embarrassingly sequels to things I haven't read, which is always a gamble. But it is less of a gamble when they're very cheap used books. The first of them was a very surprising find because this is a very recent release. This is The Fire Opal Mechanism by Fran Wilde. This is a Tor.com publishing release. By length, I'm guessing it might be either a longer novella or a very short novel, but this is technically a sequel to The Jewel and Her Lapidary, which was also a Tor.com publishing novelette, I think, by word count. But I think this is a sort of looser companion sequel set in the same world, so I don't think you have to read The Jewel and Her Lapidary first. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I probably will try to find a copy of that and read it since it's so short. Fran Wilde is one of those authors whose stuff I've sort of been meaning to read for a long time, but the only thing of hers I've actually read was her very bizarre short story that was nominated for a Hugo last year that was called Clearly Lettered in a Mostly Steady Hand, I think. That was a bizarro story. I've had a copy of Updraft, the first book in her Bone Universe series, for quite a while now, and now I've got this. I know she also just came out with a middle grade novel that I'm very interested in. At some point I'll actually read a book-length thing by Fran Wilde, I promise. The next sequel to a book I haven't yet read that I picked up was Curtsies and Conspiracies by Gail Carriger, the second book in the Finishing School series, which is her YA series in the Parasol Protectorate universe. Now I have reason to believe that I will like this series better than the Parasol Protectorate series. Leah Cooper has been reading and talking about this series lately, and I've discussed some of the differences with her in comments a bit. She says this series is more steampunk and less romance than the Parasol Protectorate, which is sort of what I want. However, I do think there are some things in this series where it's better, if you're planning on reading the adult books in this world, to actually read the Parasol Protectorate series first. And I've only read the first book, Soulless, so far, so I don't know if I should push my way through more of the Parasol Protectorate before diving into the finishing school. Let me know what you think if you've read both of these series. But I've owned the first book in this series, which is Etiquette and Espionage, for a while now. And I also have books 2 and 3 of the Parasol Protectorate, but not the rest of that series. And then the last sequel to a book I've not yet read that I picked up for $1 is Fire Dance by Ilana C. Meyer, which is, I think, a sort of companion novel sequel to The Last Song Before Night. I think this follows the same main character but in a completely different story. Now this is one where my sort of interest in book 2, when this was being released, I was seeing authors talk about this book on Twitter and such. My interest in this book is what made me pick up the first book. These books, I think, are kind of traditional fantasy that focus a bit on the arts. At least I'm pretty sure that the first book is significantly about music, and then this one looks like it has some magical intrigue. And look at the cover, it's absolutely gorgeous. So then I have the 3 used books that I got for less cheap, but these are very, very nice. So there's a bit of a story with these. I was in Boston with a friend over the 4th of July, and on the 4th we were doing the, like, Walk the Freedom Trail thing, where you follow, like, the little brick trail in the sidewalk that brings you past all of, like, the historic sites in downtown Boston. And this used bookstore had me figured because they had put out a little sign right along the Freedom Trail saying, like, used and rare books this way, pointing down a narrow alley. And of course, that sign worked exactly as intended on me, because I was walking along like Freedom Trail, Freedom Trail, Freedom Trail, ooh, used books, used books, used books, without even breaking a stride. And thank goodness for good friends, because my friend did not even question why we were, of course, making this detour down a random alley to go shop for used books. But these are 3 of the novellas in the Penric and Desdemona series by Lois McMaster Bujold, in these beautiful Subterranean Press editions with nice plastic protective covering. So in order, these are Penric and the Shaman, Penric's Mission, and Mira's Last Dance, which are books 2, 3, and 4. I'll still have to get my hands on book 1 somehow, possibly in ebook form. But these were just too tempting to pass up. They were more expensive than my usual used book purchases, but they were less than cover price for, you know, limited print editions. Of these, 2 of the 3, Penric's Mission and Mira's Last Dance, are the signed numbered editions, and then Penric and the Shaman is just a regular hardcover. So you can see that these are signed. These are just lovely to have. Now, Bujold is an author where I have only read 1 of her books so far, Curse of Chalian, and I have about a gazillion of them on my TBR. I think the next books of hers I'm going to read are probably Cordelia's Honor, which is the first bind-up in the Vorkosigan saga, and then Paladin of Souls, which is the next book in the Curse of Chalian series. So it'll probably be a while before I get around to these, so that'll give me some time to figure out how I want to get my hands on book 1. So then last in this haul, I have 3 new books, all 2019 releases. These were all on my anticipated reads of 2019 list at the beginning of the year, and the first is Magic for Liars by Sarah Gailey. Now, I was able to go to a release event for this book in New York that was the day after BookCon ended, so like all of the authors and publishing people were still in the city. And that event was actually on the Monday, the day before this book technically released, and then I think Sarah Gailey did another event the next day in some other city on the actual release day. But this event was at Greenlight Bookstore in Brooklyn, which is an independent bookstore in the city I had never been to before. It was lovely. I enjoyed hearing Sarah Gailey talk some about this book. They were in conversation with Victoria Schwab. I really do enjoy getting to go to book events like that where I get to hear the authors talk a bit about their new releases that I'm excited for, and I get to learn some about the book before diving into reading it. This sounds like just a fascinating novel. It's like a noir murder mystery set in a magic school, and the main character is a non-magical PI whose sister is very magically gifted, and I gather there's like a lot of personal tension around the protagonist, Ivy's like jealousy over not being magical. This is Sarah Gailey's first novel, but I previously read their novella duology, River of Teeth and Taste of Marrow, which were alternate history westerns. So they're definitely building a career of really eclectic speculative fiction. I'm very excited to read this. The next book I've got, I bought at Barnes & Noble, and this is Sooner or Later Everything Falls into the Sea, which is a short story collection from Sarah Pinsker. This is published by Small Beer Press, and I very rarely see their books at Barnes & Noble, so I was happy to find a copy of it. And this includes a couple of stories I've read before. It includes Wind Will Rove and then there were N-1, which were both nominated for Hugos last year. I liked those both a lot, so I'm really looking forward to seeing what else is in here. And then the last new anticipated 2019 release I have on this list is one I pre-ordered, and that is Gods of Jade and Shadow by Silvia Moreno-Garcia. This is a historical fantasy novel set in 1920s Mexico with Mayan mythology. I've heard it's very fairy tale-ish, which absolutely thrills me. Silvia Moreno-Garcia is an author whose books have all seemed to be really different from one another, and so I'm obviously very excited to hear that her newest release is fairy tale-ish, because woohoo, this is so clearly the book of hers that is for me. I mean, The Beautiful Ones was also very clearly for me because that was Fantasy of Manners, so yes. I have heard such great things about this. I did a happy dance when it arrived in the mail. Okay, so those were they. Those were my books for July and August. I very rarely actually do this thing, the booktube thing, where you pick up all the books at the end of the video and show them again, but they're all in one stack. I can do that here. Often I sort of like scatter the books as I'm filming. I drop them all over the place. There we go. Those were the books. Anyhow, let me know if you've read any of these books. If you're planning to, let me know what you think. Anyhow, I hope you're having a nice day. That is all. Bye for now.